Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Friday, March the 10th, 2023. Continue our look at parables. We began the week on Tuesday talking about what parables are. Probably the simplest definition is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And then the past 2 days, we looked at a couple of parables from Matthew 13. Well, now we're going to come up to the parable that was actually our gospel reading a couple of weeks ago, the parable of the unforgiving servant. The parable about the king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves, and he talks to the one who owed him this huge amount of money, and the man begs for forgiveness, and the king is moved and forgives him the debt. But then that guy goes out, and a fellow slave who owed him far less begged for the same kind of patience and forgiveness. But now he was unwilling to give it to his fellow slave the way the king had given it to him. A fellow by the name of John Shearhart once wrote a modern version of this parable. Again, the parable of the unforgiving servant or slave. His parable goes like this. A bank president wished to settle an overdue account with a farmer who owed him several $1 million. And so he called him and asked him to come to his office. And as the two discussed the situation, it became apparent that the farmer couldn't even meet the basic monthly payment. The owner sighed and said, "Well, sir, I'm afraid we're going to have to repossess your house and car and all your equipment. We also need to liquidate all your stock just to get this debt paid." The man pushed back his chair and he dropped to his knees in tears and he pled with the banker, "Times are hard, sir. My crop failed. I can't find another job. Besides, this farm is all I've ever known. It's all I have. Please be patient with me. I'll pay you everything." Well, the banker looked at the man and felt compassion. He thought to himself, "This has been such a great year. I've made so much money that I can take a hit like this without really feeling it. Besides, what if I was the one in that chair?" You can tell this is a story because I don't know of any bankers that would look at it this way. He goes on, he said, "I'm moved to compassion by your situation," he told the man. "I've received so many blessings. I tell you what, forget the debt. You don't owe me a penny." And the man leaped to his feet, nearly jumped over his desk, hugging the owner of the bank. "Oh, thank you so much, sir," he exclaimed. "This is incredible." And he ran out of the office rejoicing. Now, on the farmer's land was a small sharecropper's house. It wasn't worth much, but an old man rented it from him. And not long after his meeting at the bank, the farmer went to his tenant's house to collect the rent money. "Have you got the rent?" he asked. "No," replied his tenant. "I'm sorry, no, I said I would have it, but I lost my job and I had to use it on food." "You've been late nearly every month for almost 8 years, the farmer screamed. "I'm tired of it. Pay what you owe me now." And the tenant begged him, "Please be patient with me and I'll get it." But the farmer wasn't willing. He stormed out of the house and had the man evicted. Now, the bank president heard about everything that had happened. So he called the farmer and he asked him to come back to his office. And as soon as the farmer stepped inside, the owner hollered, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had compassion on your tenant as I had compassion for you? Now I will do everything I had planned to do before." The point of the parable, of course, is that God is like the king. God is like the bank president who forgives all our debt, which is wonderful. But the implication is that we are to go then and forgive others as we have been forgiven. I kind of relate very personally to this parable because of something that Jeanette and I went through several years ago. I've shared this in a previous sermon on this particular passage. To make a long story short, we were in a situation back down in Georgia. I had accepted a new call, moved to Ohio. When the housing market crashed, we weren't able to sell our home. And the same time, though, if you remember, the big banks, which had given out a lot of bad loans, the no-doc loans, they didn't check whether somebody could actually repay it. The housing market just kept getting better and better. They figured people would be able to pay it, and all of a sudden, like a house of cards, pun intended, it all came tumbling down And so what did the government do? The government bailed out the big banks with the TARP. Remember that? The Troubled Asset Relief Program, $700 billion it was to the tune of. The idea was that the banks then would be able to lend money once their finances were in order. They'd be able to continue to lend money to people, and so the people on Wall Street, in a sense, would be able to then help the people on Main Street. Another version, I guess, of trickle-down economics. Well, they used it to put their bottom lines in order and go back to giving huge bonuses and everything else. Not one of them ever got in trouble for the mess that they brought us to. But then they were not as forgiving to people who owed them money, and we were an example of that. We owed a mortgage on a house, and we couldn't sell it. And the bank, at the time they had all these things. Oh, you can talk to the bank about refinancing and everything else. Well, it didn't happen. And so this is something that happens in real life. It happened to me. Maybe it's happened to you at some point. And it's that reminder that so often in life we are not forgiving. But when we recognize how much we have been forgiven by God, we can't help but be forgiving of others. Well, that's it for today. We're going to come back tomorrow and actually look at the parable from this past Sunday. Until then, take care. Looking forward to sharing with you then. Bye-bye.